will be recording this. If you are uncomfortable with it, anybody uncomfortable with it being recorded, let's do it that way. I'm not seeing a lot of, no, everybody's okay. So we're going to go ahead and record, and the little light is pulsing at the top of the screen. So I guess we're in business. So we'll welcome you to the first day of November 2022. How did that happen? And the fall iteration of the CTE Revitalization Grant Advisory Committee meeting. So we will, just for the sake of getting reacquainted, do a quick round the screen to say who we are, what we do, and where we do it. And then we'll plunge into our outline. And I'm going to start by kicking it over to Tom, and then you can pass it to the next person.
Good afternoon. Yes, it is afternoon. Tom Spoo, principal at Hermiston High School. Been on the committee for several years now, and prior to my start, we were, I think, the first year the Revite grant process started. Hermiston was a recipient with our student-built homes, which we're working on number eight or nine now. So it's kind of cool. But so glad to be part of the committee. And I'll pass it off to Linda.
Thank you, Tom. And hi, everybody. I'm Linda Catterall with ODE. Been with ODE about 8.5 years. And this is, I believe, my 4th or 5th go round with Revite. And it's kind of become a way of life. And I'm very happy to support it. And I will send it over to Meg.
Hi, I'm Meg Kilmer. I'm the high school outreach coordinator for the Pacific Northwest Carpenters Institute. It's the Union Carpenters Apprenticeship Program. Former CTE lead for Park Road School District and Portland Public Schools, assistant to the assistant lead. So feel comfortable in the CTE world, and my job now is supporting construction tech type teachers. So really happy to be here and give away somebody else's money to make good things happen for Oregon kids. Casey.
Hi, I'm Casey Andrew. I'm with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. And even though colleges don't participate in the Revite grants, we do benefit from them. So I'm just kind of here to listen and learn. And if you've got any questions about college, please do ask me. I'm going to pass it to Bridget.
Hi there, my name is Bridget Quinn. I'm with the NECA IBEW Electrical Training Center. I'm the Workforce Development Coordinator and instructor here at the training center. Good to see everybody. Oh, sorry, I will pass it to, let's see. I think that was it, wasn't it?
We got 2 of us left. I can be last, so why don't we go ahead and prod Mr. Peacock.
I'm Jerry Peacock. I am the CTE Regional Coordinator for the Malheur ESD. I have the opportunity to work in 23 school districts in 6 counties, all in Eastern Oregon, obviously, comprising quite a vast area. So I've been on this committee long enough, I don't remember when, but it's been a while. And Dan, it's up to you now.
All to me. Okay. Dan Findlay, ODE. Pleasure of helping to guide and shepherd the CTE Revitalization grant program. Been affiliated with it since actually pretty much the beginning. And yeah, excited to see where we are going and what the future is going to bring. Nobody knows, but we know that people appreciate CTE, and we know that the grants are continuing to make a difference. So we're excited about that. So we're all, as they say, everybody who's here is here. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next topic of importance, which is the reading of public comment. And I'm kicking it over to Linda for that.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we have no public comments to read, but for the record, what we do, standard is about 30 days before the meeting, we put a notice on the CTE Revite Grant webpage that there is a meeting and that public comment is welcome. We provide an email address for folks to send in comments, and we receive none this time.
Thank you very much, Linda. So we'll roll into current status. We'll be looking at reporting from grantees, talking about some bright spots, talking about some challenges, and then rounding it out before we go into deep dive challenges. So reporting wise, despite everyone having tons of things that they needed to do in wrapping up the summer and beginning the year, our fall response or our fall response rate, or actually which would be our summer response rate, ended up being 93%. We had some individual districts who had a little bit more trouble responding because of just things that are going on. And our process is to iterate through those people and, you know, prod and cajole and ask nice questions to see if we can find out where they are. Primarily, we're interested in, are there problems that they're running into, and why they may feel like they need to be non-responsive. By contrast, our very first report of the year, there were a number of people who were surprised at this, and I'm one of them. So we had a 100% response rate when we did the reports in the spring. And those are primarily to find out what sort of progress are you making? Where are you having problems? What sorts of partnerships are you designing and building? What sorts of bright spots or positive things are you seeing happening? One of the concerns that was voiced among some is that there just simply wouldn't be enough bandwidth and time for people to have anything to report. And it really was not the case at all. Linda, do you want to comment on any of the reports or aspects of reporting from either update 1 or update 2?
Well, just in general, I can give a little background just to refresh us. We do require or require 4 updates during the course of the grant and 1 final report at the end. They go out every 3 months or so. The questions we ask change a little bit from update to update. Some are always there. Some change a little bit depending on where we assume they'll be in the progress in their grant. But our standard questions cover partnerships at the beginning. It's more like, how many partners do you have on board and how do you anticipate they'll be engaging? A little further along, it's how many do you have now and how have they been engaging, that type of thing. We're always interested in their progress to date, their estimate of how far they are into their program, and how if they've received any media coverage or community support. And we always ask about challenges and bright spots. We do make it a point when we've gotten all of the reports in, to take a look. We're not just asking them to report just to do a checkbox on our end. If there are questions that come up, requests for help, or things that in our estimation might be a sign of a little red flag situation that comes in on an update, we take a look at it as a Revite team, and then we'll contact that grant recipient to see how things are going. Let's see, our bright spots. They come in the form of what we ask about: partnership, support, and student engagement and excitement. Even at the very beginning, I was interested this time. Even the first update showed a lot of comments about the students being excited about the new equipment or the new opportunities. So that was really nice. That was nice to pull out. Challenges. This is going to kind of dovetail into something we're going to take a deeper dive into in a few minutes. But there are some standard challenges or types of challenges that always seem to come up from grant to grant or biennium to biennium. There are usually some construction issues and vehicle issues, maybe exacerbated this time through a little bit by some pandemic aftermath. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes. There's always going to be some change in grant personnel, which can cause some ripples in the grants. We get a lot of requests for budget realignments. Those have been going pretty smoothly, I think. As long as people are keeping in the spirit of what they intend to do initially, that's usually fine. But we do ask them to be pretty specific in if they are making substantive changes to what they initially requested. This year, we had a little bit of a delay in the funds appearing in the EGIMS reimbursement process. We did get some comments about that. Some, of course, this is going to affect more or some grants differently than others. Some folks had indicated their finance department would not let them really begin or purchase anything until that money was in EGIMS. There wasn't a heck of a lot we could do about that other than say, we understand it will be there. Fortunately, I believe that resolved itself as far as Revite in July, right around July. So much later than we would prefer, but I think we're running smoothly now. And beyond that, yeah, as I say, we will be talking a little bit more about some specific challenges, specific grants that had challenges this time, mostly in the construction area.
Mhm. Thank you, Linda. Any particular questions, comments, or concerns in the reporting of the bright spots area? Don't see anybody lighting up, so we're going to go ahead and talk about the challenges. And the order in which they fall is not necessarily indicative of much other than just the way that it came in. Construction cost timelines and permitting, this continues to be an ongoing question. And when we get down to the point of talking about advanced planning and looking forward to what we hope will be a 23-25 iteration of CTE Revite, we're going to want to lean on your best thinking and some of your ideas around several of these categories. Construction costs tend to be squirrely because of supply chain, pardon me, issues. And also the reality that if you have to pay prevailing wage, there may be a better way to make money than to work for the construction of a school-related project. That's not a judgment other than the reality and something that we have heard periodically and run into. But regardless, with everything having gone up, with lumber having gone up dramatically, with steel having gone up, and with things being in lesser supply, that's caused some problems for people. Permitting has also been an issue. We had one particular program that we'll talk about, and in fact, if you look at the reference down under a deep dive challenges, we'll talk about this at length a little bit later. Corbett was attempting to get themselves hooked into a portable that would allow them to immediately increase the learning space to support their CTE program, only to run into several problems, not the least of which was one of their potential portables kind of drying up and blowing away, and another one in much worse repair being offered up as an alternative. They couldn't do that because they were told the portable might not survive the trip up the freeway to get out to Corbett. So that would be somewhat counterproductive. And then they started looking at existing structures that they had in the district and within town, and kept running into bumps in the carpet and other issues. Some of them being permitting issues, some of them being certificate of occupancy issues. One of the situations involved looking at a lease agreement, and the price of the lease went up astronomically almost overnight, to the point that they were not going to be able to afford it, to say nothing of the fact that it becomes a little difficult to justify using grant funds to try to zero out a lease over a 5-year period of time when there's no guarantee that that's going to, number one, it's going to solve the problem for the program, or number two, that they're going to be able to continue their programming in that space, since it would be for a finite period of time. Apparently working with city offices, county offices, engineers' offices, permitting offices. Schools have continued to have problems getting paperwork through, getting things approved, or engineering costs being extremely high as engineering reports being necessary to do revisions to buildings. So that's been an issue. Another thing has been timelines. We had one program, they ordered a vehicle in April. They expected it would be ordered in July. You know where this is going. They called me or sent an email in a bit of a panic in September when we sent out after we had sent out the grant contracts for everyone to sign, and they weren't getting their contract back in, and they finally responded with an email and said, well, we can't get our vehicle. We don't want to sign this unless we can get our vehicle. So we ended up having a very fruitful conversation over Zoom with the superintendent, the principal, and several of us, and talked them through and figured out that they were in fact working to achieve the outcomes of their grant. They were simply having to do it differently because they couldn't have that particular vehicle. I just yesterday received an email from the same program saying they can get their vehicle, but the vehicle is going to cost more. So I'm not sure how you work that out after there's been an agreement, but kind of there you are. So those have been problems. Changing grant personnel. I don't think it's any secret to anyone. There's been a tremendous shift in personnel everywhere in general, but in schools, school districts, CSDs in particular, and germane to our conversation. And because of this, sometimes the individuals who end up inheriting the grant program or grant programs, as the case may be, have little to no information about them. And they are not in a position to roll forward and try to change things. So we have received a number of communications from individuals who said the person who negotiated this and put the grant together, et cetera, is no longer here anymore, and they really didn't leave anything behind for us. Can you help us find the original grant proposal, the communications between ODE and the school, and even in some cases, the signed grant contract, which we've been able to do. Unfortunately, we've been able to turn those things around in probably half a day to 3 days so that folks have what they need when they need it. But that has been a concern. Another challenge, there was a delay in EGM's funding. It took a while for us to get things processed because the grant agreements, even though we had been told this would not be the case, the grant agreements were referred to Department of Justice to make sure that the process around the grant program ran well and ran appropriately. There was also the concern about the grants that exceeded the 150K mark, which meant that they needed to be reviewed for legal sufficiency by the Department of Justice. So these things simply took longer. The larger grants came out last, but I think there are only 2 of those large grants for which the grant agreement has not been signed. And we're continuing to prod into those people to make sure they have what they need so that they can do what they need to do and can feel comfortable moving in and signing their agreements. And then the last bullet that you see there are budget realignments. I can flick my focus right now and I can look at a grant right here. We're going to be committing a vehicle to the process, and the vehicle went up in cost about 25%. And that is a very recent one that just came through. That particular group, they may be able to come up with a different angle on it because they haven't negotiated their contract on it yet. But these are things that are common, and there are threads here. One of the threads being construction, renovation, new construction, etc. The second one being anything to do with vehicles. So one of the things we're going to talk about in advanced planning has to do with, are there any things that we need to do as a group to try and make things easier by reducing the number of choices people have in investing their funds. So that's an important one. Signed grant agreements at this point, we're at about 96% of the signed grant agreements are in and are signed, which means these people are doing the work. And I can also tell you that out of the 7.321 million that was allocated to this grant, we have total claims so far of $1,347,000. So we're at about 18.5% that has been claimed so far. And we have a couple of programs that have in fact claimed their total allocation under the grant. So there are people who are doing things, but then when I look at the list of grants, I see that there's a disproportionately large number of programs that haven't yet been reimbursed a single dollar. This is not necessarily uncommon, and even though our friend and colleague Reynold Gardner will say of Perkins reimbursements, ask for your reimbursement regularly, spend down, spend down, spend down, and do it on a monthly basis. People are not always able to do that, and we do over the years, and those of you who have been with Revite for a number of years are aware that we get down near the end and somewhere between, say, the latter part of April and June 30th at 11:58 p.m., we have a bunch of people who are asking for funding or reimbursements rather. So of course they're due those, they'll get them, it won't be a problem, but sometimes processes get in the way and it kind of slows things down. So we wanted to mention that. It's not something that we see as being a problem, but it's an interesting thing to notice. We are eager to see that there are more people who are able to do more things this go around for the grant. And we think that that may translate into people completing their claims sooner and us pulling things together. Regardless, it'll all work out and we should be in good shape. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there and see if there are any questions or comments about challenges, knowing that we're going to go down the rabbit hole with those a bit more. But if there's any sort of top of mind things you want to surface right now.
Dan, my recollection is that when we posted that grant, wasn't there a part in there that said if you're going to purchase a vehicle or do some form of construction that they had to get approval through you?
Essentially, what we said was you need to have a conversation. We didn't want to get into the business of doing pre-approvals because part of doing CTE Revite is allowing people to innovate and create. And that's why there's been a lot of magic created over the years, is that folks have had the opportunity to think broadly and divergently about the work that they're doing. And yes, we have not gone so far as to put a stake in the ground and say no. We have, however, in our conversations, and Linda's been involved in those. I think Casey was in a couple of them before she left and went off to Clackamas. Gabby was in a number of them. We would do them together, 2 or 3 of us with a candidate. And we did have people for whom we raised some really pivotal questions. And we had a number of potential recipients who just decided, hey, we're not going to do this. It didn't pencil out. It didn't make sense. And in a lot of cases, it was kind of a ready, fire, aim approach that they were taking. They thought it'd be a really dandy idea to do this until they figured out how complicated it was. And a couple of the districts, and I won't go into naming names because this is stuff that it should never happen. The teachers were told, you can do this, but we're not going to support you. And one instance, the district said, oh, great, you're going to buy a vehicle. You'll give us the title. We'll take care of the vehicle and then we'll use it. And then when you need it, you can let us know. But the grant program that was going to generate the existence of the vehicle was going to not have right of first refusal and was going to be third, fourth, or fifth in line anytime they needed to take their kids out and do something. And they ultimately did not do anything. That one was a particular burr under my saddle. I didn't like that one. And, I didn't make it known that I didn't like it, but it was very sort of irritating to see something go in that direction.
Well, I think as we move forward with this grant, let's be realistic. If we're going to keep them at the $125,000 threshold or level, we're not going to do much construction for that. And it may depend on the size of your district as well. $125,000 in a small rural district has different meaning than maybe in a district the size of Tom's in Hermiston. 125,000 is really pretty small potatoes. But I think that maybe we need to have a conversation, maybe later, wherever it's appropriate, of whether or not we even believe it should be used in construction. To me, that's what high school success can do. And you get millions of dollars going into high school success funds. And this might be one of those that supports what you're doing in high school success by adding equipment and materials and some of those things, but in professional development as well, but not necessarily as the basis to get things done. Vehicles, to me, I have dealt with the fallout from that in the district, and you just alluded to it, where they purchased a vehicle last time around, and the district took over the vehicle. And the program that it was purchased for has to sign up just like anyone else. Mm-hmm. And I think it's beyond the intent of what it was. I think we need to evaluate whether or not we want construction or the purchase of vehicles in this grant. And that's something we might want to consider. I don't know what your plans are with that. But.
Well, my plans vis-a-vis that topic is to have a conversation with all y'all and push that around, because ultimately you see things from a lot of different perspectives. And we want this, you want it to work, we want it to work. This is an aspect that is, actually, you pointed out two aspects that are not working. And I will actually presume to observe that we've had the same conversation for the last couple of years, that the same things seem to be the elements that are tripping people up. And maybe we need to not be doing, it's that old thing about the definition of insanity. And maybe that's something that we need to decide that, you know, as a group is not necessarily the way to go. And if there are better ways to achieve that goal, then maybe the other ways to achieve that goal should be leveraged. And go.
I can imagine the attraction of, a vehicle. It solves a lot of problems. I can't get my kids on a field trip. We can never get a bus. If I only had a 15 passenger van, it would solve a lot of problems. And I would share it with the other CTE teachers. I can just imagine that conversation. Mm-hmm. So there'll come a time when those little buses or vans are not as hard to come by. So I wouldn't take that one off the table just yet, I don't think.
Question on that one. When it comes to the transportation piece, which I do think is can be a huge barrier, especially to smaller rural districts, but what's their plan, or what would the plan be for maintenance and all the things that come along with that? Because we'd hate to see them get funded for that, and then we're not able to also do the things that they need to keep it for years to come. So is that in the, would like to just throw that out there too.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think what happens is that the district ends up with a vehicle, and because they're paying the liability and the maintenance and taking care of it, all the insurance costs, all the things of the overhead, that's where the ownership piece comes in. And then when programs believe that they have access to it to go to an event, FFA, whatever the case might be, they're told in some cases in my region, not all, but in some cases, well, somebody else already has it checked out. It's like, well, wait a minute, we bought that with a grant. So it's all over the board, and it sounds like an easy application, but it doesn't always come out that way, because I've dealt with it, and I've even had to get ODE involved once or twice, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if I want these vehicles anymore, son of a gun.
So Jerry, you would be like, let's take that out of the options menu of what they could use the Revite money for?
I think so. I think
I respect
so.
that.
And the reason I say that is because I just believe that there are other things. I know that the vehicles can be a shortage issue. Drivers can be an issue. But I think that there's so many other things that can support kids on a daily basis, a consistent basis, than what an occasional use of a vehicle is to take them to a meeting.
So
And that's what I'm.
can I ask
that's
this
what I'm looking
question? Yeah, I have a quick question on that. So what if there was a differential between, because I know I've seen some programs where they have a vehicle that goes to different sites, especially in rural communities, that provide, say, welding equipment or shared equipment between different facilities that they can't afford to have at every school, or they don't have the number of students to justify having certain equipment. So they've bought a vehicle that they could then equip it with different types of CTE learning tools, so to speak. And then that vehicle goes from location to location, but you're not transporting kids. You're not using it for anything outside of that. Maybe there might be a way to utilize funds for that, but not specifically for transporting kids. And instead, if they want to transport kids, they could apply for funding to be able to do buses or utilize funds for buses. But what if there's an opportunity for them to do that? Does that present the same issues? I'm not in that world per se anymore, so I don't know if that would have the same issue or not, but throw that out there.
It seems to me like if we were to authorize vehicles, we would want to see in our office some kind of a contract or memorandum of understanding that the primary use of the vehicle is for CTE and for the, for the purposes of the Revite grant, which is not to say that the district couldn't use it for other things, but that its primary use is for CTE and specifically for the purposes of the Revite grant. I don't know how enforceable something like that is. If a district said, but we want to take some people for 3 days, and yeah, I'm sorry, you've got an event then, but we're going to take it for 3 days to this other location. I don't know where the teeth of that would be.
I don't think that would be unreasonable to ask. And just thinking about Jody's idea of having one CTE kind of mobile training sort of thing, having them submit some sort of a mock-up of what that's going to look like it's kind of hard for the district to repurpose that if it's full of CTE stuff.
That's true, yeah.
If I'm going to comment, we're talking about two different things. One of them, one would be more like a trailer with maybe equipment that gets shared between districts, which that to me is different than the transportation piece. And I've been on both sides of the transportation piece. One, as an ag teacher, when we made a purchase through Carl Perkins several years ago, where after, I believe, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but after 5 years, it then does become the property of the said school district, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But then as a principal, where we've bought lots of different vehicles, not under the Revite window of time, but just through other grant funds, et cetera. Some of us for CTE, some of us for this, some of us for that. And there's always that bone of contention. Well, we bought it for this purpose, but then it just sits there. And then you're right, the district pays the insurance, district pays the maintenance costs. And so then you turn around and say, well, we have a vehicle just sitting here, so it should get used. But at the same time, it's a little bit of a damn if you do, damn if you don't. But I do like, because I think there's administrators out there that, because I live that side of it, that don't understand what it was originally bought and paid for and what its use was meant for. So to me, an MOU does make some sense, because as a district, we've been pretty blessed because we're big, and so we can purchase those types of vehicles. But I would personally hate to say no to some of these smaller school districts that don't have the access to the transportation that maybe we have here at Hermiston, just because we're bigger and we have more money. I hate to see small schools lose out. Other than I do get the frustration. Hence I kind of like that idea of an MOU that, hey, for maybe this number of years, priority, maybe not all of it, but priority is absolutely dedicated to what it was intended for.
No, or simply, reserve it for certain hours a day. For these hours of the day, it's only, it can only be used for CTE purposes. I think it's workable. And I think, like you, I would hate to completely restrict it 100%. Because I think there are ways that a vehicle could be very useful and benefit a lot of people in a district. But, and once we get past like the supply chain issues where you have to wait forever to get what you want, it seems like I think that we should, personally would keep it on the list, but with a lot of caveats.
Right, they can ask, we don't have to approve it.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan and I have been chatting on the side too, thinking about what if it was a trailer that housed different, going back to my original idea or thought or concern around mobile units for rural areas. It could be a trailer, and then the district uses its own vehicles, maintenance vehicles or whatever, to move the trailer. Then you wouldn't have the issues of outside the program use, and you wouldn't have as much of an insurance maintenance type cost. So you could limit it to a trailer type situation rather than a motor vehicle. Just a thought. Jerry, what do you think of that?
Well, I think there's some promise to that, Jody. There's potential. I think that hearing what everyone's saying, I think Meg's correct when she says, it doesn't have to be approved. Yeah. At some point, maybe, Dan, if there's a request for a vehicle, what Casey said needs to be in there. There's a memorandum of understanding that if you're going to get a vehicle, these things have to be agreed upon. And first priority is to the CTE program. Second level is that you understand that the purchase of a vehicle will require maintenance and insurance. Typically, is not going to be part of the CTE program. They can't fund that. It's going to be a requirement of the district. And so the district has to sign off on that memorandum if they even want a vehicle. And I think that might alleviate some of it, because some districts are going to say, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
very
move
true.
on. I think Jody has a good point. One of the things in rural Oregon where I'm at, we've kicked this around for years, and that's the trailer piece, moving it from district to district. You can't move a trailer without a doggone vehicle. Okay, if you're going to put modules in it that's going to share between your districts. And then the question keeps coming up when we talk about that, where's that truck going to stay? Who's going to be doing that? Moving
Same
it.
problem
Who's
then.
going to be responsible for moving it? Who's going to, there's so many questions that come up about that. Eventually we just say, maybe a trailer is not a good idea to move from district to district, even though it is. You hit the nail on the head too, I think, Dan, when you talked about you get everything in place and it's going good, and then someone leaves that was a part of that decision-making process. Someone who agrees to be a driver or go to training and get the modules and understand it, and then boom, they're gone. And then here's some more stuff we purchased that just doesn't get utilized properly. And so I think that's where you have to, that's what I said earlier, is how is it being used on a consistent basis to help move the dial for kids? And I think that's in a bigger district. I've been to Tom's and I've looked at his construction program. I know how that's moving the dial. So anything that goes into a Revite grant for that program, it's incredible what they do. And the vehicle is not even a question, because I know how they would use it there. But not all districts can operate that way. So just a lot there to think about. I like the MOU. If we're going to keep it in the grant, let's develop an MOU process where the district signs off on the use of or the willingness to have a vehicle.
I'm often sort of at a loss for how much I should or can say in these meetings, because I kind of have a vested interest in a dog in the fight, and I kind of don't. And I'm still a taxpayer like everyone else, so I think that probably makes a difference too. But it would seem that if we were talking about a trailer or a loaded caravan with CTE equipment or something like that, then that would really presuppose that we had a program walking up to us and saying, we're going to share this between 2 or 3 high schools, or this is going to live at the ESD and it's going to travel within this ESD. If that's not the case, then there's really no reason to have either a trailer or a tow vehicle. So that one kind of takes care of itself if the committee decides that it probably is not in the best interest of the program to be providing transportation, which has its own huge liability thing associated with it. But, obviously that's not our problem, that's the district's problem, but I still think about those things. That kind of puts it in a slightly different place if the equipment will not be moving anyway. Then, do you need a vehicle? Which takes us to that next point of how high are the barriers and how high is the requirement for the folks who are making application to make sure they have all of their ducks in a row so that they have the necessary support. And if they don't have the support, then going back to what Meg says, we can read it and we don't have to approve it. So just thinking out loud for a minute, trying not to put my thumb on a scale anywhere, but just thinking about what I would think about if I were back in running programs and so forth.
If I were running a program or as the grant writer, I might like so you want to buy a vehicle checklist as a best practice. And it might ask, what do you think it's going to cost you to park it, gas it up, maintain it, pay the insurance? Who's going to drive it? will your superintendent sign off on it? I don't know what all the questions would be, but you know, Jerry's point, do you have an MOU? We could make that little one pager for the grant writer. Are you sure this is a good idea? Do you have any other ideas that would be easier to implement? You know?
And Jerry and Tom aren't well, and Meg, you would know this too from the time that you spent at the districts. Districts are on the hook for student transportation anyway.
But they don't have to fund field trips or going to FFA or Skills USA or work-based learning activities. Sometimes those things, those enrichment things don't happen. But I'd rather see them write in a plan like we want to spend $5,000 on field trips and transportation as opposed to buying a vehicle, which is a kind of a longer term thing. Neither are really sustainable, but important to get kids out of school too.
But what I'm hearing you saying, Meg, is that if they're spending $5,000 to move X number of students Y amount of distance to have Z experience, that's much more immediate and learner focused than to spend the very same chunk of money on a fraction of a vehicle. That while
you might not get to use because the volleyball tournament needs it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've probably ridden that horse long enough. I think maybe we ought to just go with the MOU piece and continue to look at it. And somebody's going to have to make the decision whether or not it's a good proposal or not, and have all the questions answered. If they aren't answered, it's not a good proposal. And so we move on. You know, I don't think we're going to resolve that. The question is, do we keep it in or do we not? The answer, it seems like from people talking, is yes, with some caveats.
So what I'm hearing is an MOU piece, and it sounds like not just a checklist of suggested questions, but a checklist of required engagements with signatures and initials if you're going to do it, because the last thing you want to do is buy a 1-ton truck and find out that your CTE program has to pay for everything related to that truck. As nice as
exactly right.
As nice as it will be to have the truck, it's only nice until you can't afford to pay for it anymore. Ask any kid.
That's exactly it. It's
Yes.
nice till you drive it off the lot.
That's right.
And it's worth half what you paid for it.
As far as the scoring rubric for reviewers, I don't recall exactly if we went into too much detail in this last go round for specific guidelines for reviewers to look at if they were seeing something come in for a vehicle or construction. But if we didn't, it would seem to follow that if we do decide, okay, we will allow people to apply for construction or you probably know where I'm going here, or vehicles, make sure that the rubric is correspondingly as specific and there's a high bar there too, because even if an applicant has their plan together and the district is signed up and they're fine, we need, I think, that final filter to go through. The reviewers need to be as kind of the normal general public view here. They would do it would do better if we could give them very specific questions to think about as they review what people are saying. Oh yeah, it's good, it's good. I think that would it's never going to fix everything or prevent things that might happen, but it's another safeguard.
I think so too. Yeah.
And are these questions perchance the same questions? The same questions that would be asked at the district or school level? Are they the same questions that would be asked at your level when you look at what somebody's thinking about doing?
You might have more of a real world filter at the reviewer level as to, do you think this will fly?
Dan, while I'm thinking about it,
Mhm.
to what Linda's talking about, I do recall running into an issue with one of my districts who thought they were going to be able to get a certain van of some sort to find out from ODE it doesn't meet the requirements.
Mhm.
So there are some requirements set forth by the transportation department at ODE that they need to make sure they understand. So when you're talking about that
Exactly.
checklist, they need to make sure that van meets the qualifications of being safe and all of those types of things. Because that was a real concern with one district I think you're aware of, that
Yep.
that
So we'll add that to the list.
they found out, oops, we got it. Now it doesn't meet the standards.
Not a good thing.
But I think Tom's point was well taken too, in that grant purchased equipment does revert to the school that it's in after a certain length of time. I know when I was buying computers up in Washington, it was 3 years. And so, we had to like rebuy computers every 3 years because the college would, suck them all up and distribute them the way they wanted to. And it may not be something that people are really familiar with, that little quirk of grant funding.
Does that apply to CTE Revite, Dan? At Perkins is 7 years. So a difference obviously between the Perkins laws and federal.
Yeah,
law and what
and
we
honestly,
follow
I
the
would
state
I would
laws.
have to look at the asset.
Tom may have information on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought Perkins was 5, but I don't know on the Revite what that is, but that
Well, I think that's
a.
I think 5's probably a safe number since it's going into a program that is a state recognized or a Perkins program of study. We made that pretty clear this time that you either needed to be starting a program or taking a program to the outer limits, but whatever you were doing, it was going to be a program of study. We had a long conversation about that a couple times ago. I know Jerry was a big proponent of that, and others as well. So, pardon me. So I think that's probably the safer number to go with. We try to match things up in such a way that people don't have to remember 5 different scales in order to figure out how to do something. But still in all, eventually it's going to revert. But the bigger question is, are they buying something that they're going to want to revert?
Yeah. And
And I
it
think
may be
the
different for different kinds of equipment too. There may be a different shelf life on different things.
Okay, well, what it sounds like here, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is we're looking very seriously at MOU processes around assets such as vehicles. And we are looking at a fairly hardline checklist concerning getting involved with a vehicle or getting involved with construction or remodeling to set up a learning space, to try to help people make the decisions and ask the questions before they do it, make an informed decision as they're writing it, and structure an environment for the advisory committee to evaluate what was decided so that we can be more systematic about it. Does that sum it up?
Do you think it's wise to ask them to actually produce documents and as part of the grant process? If you're buying a vehicle, we need to see your MOU, or is that over the top?
It's a good question. Because the grant application has been very streamlined, keeping it simple so that your average CTE teacher isn't too stressed out about filling out a grant application. I'm not a grant writer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, even if their superintendent signed off, said we will have an MOU if we get this, that'd be enough for me as a reviewer, I'd say.
I think I'm kind of in the trust but verify camp. I-
Okay.
I mean, if it exists, there's no reason for it to not be sent as an attachment. But maybe that's a show of bad faith. I don't know. Maybe nobody would go for it, which may not be a bad thing, but
Well, it sounds like definitely for more conversation, further conversation, and as we spin around the corner and head into January, February, meeting again and having an hour or so to invest together to talk about that and have a deeper conversation as we line things up for what we hope will be yet another go round for Revite. We don't have any information right now. We have no idea which way things may be going. We usually don't find out until half to 2/3 of the way through a session whether or not they're going to fund. And we don't know for how much.
So we put the cart before the horse, the trailer before the truck.
But we're being planful. Being planful is good.
and right now they have been very generous with CTE money. So, that could keep up. Hopefully that will keep up, because I'd like for them to recognize that, CTE is a great thing, but it's also really expensive. And, it frequently is going to need a higher level of funding than other programs.
I think with workforce issues, I'd be surprised if they decided at this particular time to pull back on this, but you never know.
Well, and with integrated guidance being really in the forefront, CTE, Revite, Perkins, high school success, all those things should be blended to provide those opportunities for kids in districts. So it really should all just be part of the process. Hopefully they have that connection.
Agreed.
There's going to be a
You're
lot of
probably
new
lobbying.
faces, so there's going to need some educating being done on some of this stuff too. So hopefully there'll be some good conversation happening.
I agree, Jody.
So Tom kicked out there, could we mock one up? And I think that's an excellent idea. And maybe what we should do is, rather than putting a placeholder for it for after the first of the year, Linda and I will take a look at the calendar when the meeting is done. And Casey, Linda, Art, and I will take a look at what might be a good way to set up the process, and then we'll start tinkering around with this and trying to get down onto paper electronically what it is we want to do and what it is we want to say. And that will also give us, I don't know what the modern equivalent of the straw man is, so I'll just call it a straw man, to be knocked down and evaluated and see if we can figure out if there are weird things in it that maybe we hadn't thought about. But certainly, like, making it more difficult in order to make it easier, which is very sort of counterintuitive. But if people don't get a chance to make bad decisions, they'll probably enjoy the process of rolling through their experience because they have kind of ticked all those boxes before it became an issue. So, anything more on this one, or you think we've just about done this one to? Yeah, way over. Okay, yeah. Fair enough. The deep dive challenges, they're probably very related. I don't even know we need to go into them in too terribly great detail. Corbett School District, they are currently looking at doing a remodel of a building about 3 miles away from the high school and using that for their CTE space. It is safe, it is certified for occupancy, and they're trying to figure out if they can use the funding to make some careful design decisions. We are awaiting their revised plan, but we've had, I would say safely, and Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, 5 different conversations with them about different ways of approaching it that, you know, continue to be varying stages of challenging for them. But this one seems like it has some promise. Culver is one of several. That's just the most recent one where we were contacted by the principal, who said, we have no records of any of this. We know we have a grant, but the person who used to be here isn't here anymore. And so what do we do and how do we do it? And we've had a couple of meetings with them and we're awaiting their plan. And we really have talked about the higher bar, or the stiff checklist, or whatever you want to call it, regarding the more problematic purchases like construction and vehicle purchase. I'm going to take or moratorium, and I'm going to see if I can find my editing tools here. And I'm just going to go ahead and line that through, because what I've heard is removing it is not necessarily the best decision, but making it a useful, powerful tool for people to make better decisions could be a way of helping them do even better. So I think we're going to take that moratorium piece off of there until we find out that we absolutely need to leave it on there. Which brings us to advanced planning. Looking at the 23-25 CTE Revite Advisory Grant Advisory Committee. So I've already spoken a bit about the fact that we don't know what we don't know, always unknown unknowns, and where we're going to be with Revite is one of them. I think Jody is spot on that in the current climate, it probably would be considered a suboptimal decision to not do Revite, because Revite does good and it does help. Linda, you want to talk a little bit about terms and some of the thinking that we had around maybe making our group a little bit bigger?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, well, I think we've all received your second year of your term letter recently. So just to refresh you, your current terms run through September of next year. So we have quite a ways to go as an advisory committee, and we appreciate your time and your thoughts always. And we will, as we get into next year, maybe springtime sometime, we'll probably ask you folks specifically whether, what your feelings would be about continuing into what we hope is a next iteration for 23-25. In the meantime, just wanted to give you, just plant some seeds and let you know that it would be nice to have a few more folks here to spread the joy and the load and get a few more voices. So if you have anyone that you know in your sphere who might be interested, and you know that we're always trying to get a nice balance between folks from education, business and industry, labor and trades, and get a nice geographic representation across the state as much as we can. So at any time, if you have ideas about people who may be interested, let us know, and then we would not run and contact them immediately without chatting with you to see what might be the best way to do that. But if you have that in the back of your mind, like, oh, you see somebody in a meeting or something, they might be interested in this. They have some interest, they have some passion, they have some experience. Let us know. They might be a great addition. It might benefit everybody.
And thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of some of the real active CTE people, folks, coordinators, educators that are really gung ho about apprenticeship training programs and other CTE options for kids.
And it can be at any time. You don't have to do it now. Because we've set up a task for ourselves already around figuring out the MOU and the checklist, and probably ought to be thinking toward meeting in, I don't know, what's today? It's November 1st, Dan, of course, it's November 1st. Looking at perhaps February and doing work between now and February on the MOU concept and a checklist. Maybe we should just tentatively think about a time in February, or even February 1st. I don't know what day of the month that is, where we might locate our next, well, that would be a Wednesday. And maybe we could just pre-plan for it.
What was that date again?
Feb 1st, which is a Wednesday.
Okay, that looks good so far.
Jody, I see you've been joined by your assistant.
Yes, this is my very first grandbaby.
Oh,
so cute.
Best club ever that I've ever been able to join in my life, man.
Isn't it fun?
It is. This is Renly.
Well, hello, how are you?
She's like, what? I hear something, but I don't get it. February 1st, what are you thinking in the morning?
Let's see.
Afternoon.
We did this at noon. I think we started at 1. Does 1 work?
I can do 1. I can't do noon. I have a standing meeting every Wednesday at noon, but I can do 1. Unless there's some crazy legislative committee or something. But
Well, you know, there'll always be one of those.
yeah.
Anybody not good with 1 p.m. on the 1st of February? I'm not seeing any nudge backs yet, so that's a good sign. Why don't we go ahead and tentatively put that one down? We'll communicate that with you, and we'll also start working toward those other elements with that in mind, and then we can have a good, robust conversation. Then, if you come up with any other names that you want to share, please feel free to go ahead and share those out so that we can be thinking about the invitations for the next go around. We don't need to have a huge group, but it's nice to have a little bit more group, and there will be a few of you who will probably decide after a while that you want to take a break from this, and it's a lot better if we don't suddenly go down to, you know, a meeting that we can hold in a Miata. That's too small, and that can happen real fast. Tom, I think you were trying to get my attention there, and I just kept on yammering. Go ahead.
It's quite all right, Dan. My question is when it comes to adding folks to this committee, what could that happen at any time, or is that kind of set?
I think we could probably do it at any time, although the customary way of doing it seems to be at the fall.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we have to wait. We could put a side note down to check rule and make sure that we have the authority and the flexibility to do that at any time. I don't remember there being anything in rule that it said it had to be at a particular period of time.
Okay. Well,
I agree.
I just written
Yeah.
down several names as you were talking of potential people, those in education, and then those outside, those in industry. I was just curious.
I
Is
think
it approved by ODE?
stipulation- Go ahead.
Is it approved, Linda, by ODE? I remember something being in your letter.
Yes, ODE, Colt, or the director of ODE, and Boley.
Yes.
They need
Has
to
to
sign
be in
off
place.
on people who are actually going to be members. I'm thinking, I don't know, I don't think we've done this since I've been around, but I wouldn't think there would be any harm if there were someone who were interested between now and the next go round, if they wanted to attend one of our meetings.
So what I.
Not as a member. I don't know that there's how the feeling would be about that, but I think that might be possible.
So if I found someone that was interested, do I just send you the name and contact and then you take over from there? Is that how that works?
You could send us the name and contact information. And then I would say, since you know them better than we do, you might have an idea what would be the best way to contact them, or if you would like to be involved in that conversation. So I would say, let us know. We'll kind of follow your lead on that.
And how many are you looking for? Did I miss that? I'm sorry.
If we increase the size of the group by 2 or 3, and if we look at the group and see, are there groups that are underrepresented? Are there individuals who would bring something interesting and different to the group? Is there geographic diversity we don't have? Diversity of various sorts we don't have, but we know someone who would be really, really good. Then I would start there.
Nice to get a counselor or two on this group.
Yeah, I think it would probably be a good idea. So that gives us something to think about and to poke into. And we have a date for reconvening. And what we will do is get together a back of an envelope charge for working on the MOU and vetting, sifting tool thing that we're going to make. And then you're welcome to have as much engagement in it as you want, as little or as much, depending on what your individual circumstances require.
Perfect.
Questions, comments, concerns, good of the order. Hearing none, thank you very much for your service on this committee and helping us think through the sometimes thorny problems of making sure that folks are getting the support they need to do the great work that they're capable of doing. We will look forward to talking with you through the winter, and we will see you all on February 1st.
Thanks, Dan.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.
Take care now. And
Okay.
you want to hit stop recording?
I think I can do that.
I think